Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on Secrets of a Healthy Mind. I know some of you were expecting to see Dr. Daniela Salazar. Unfortunately, she has been called away to an emergency, so you will be spending the next hour with me. My name is Dr. Catherine Frogley, and I'm also a clinical psychologist at the Lighthouse Arabia. And this is actually one of my favorite talks to give. I think every time I deliver this talk and every time I see one of my colleagues delivering this talk, there is something new that I take from it. So I hope I can give that to you today and that there will be lots of useful information you are going to learn today. So I can just see the numbers are going up. So I'm just going to start with some quick housekeeping. And then once people have kind of settled into the webinar, I will share my screen with you and we can get into today's content. But first of all, can I ask if everyone can see me and hear me clearly? Can I just ask that along the bottom, some of you just click raise hand so I can just see, excellent, that you can all hear me and see me clearly. Wonderful. We also have a Q&A function at the bottom. And I can see someone said good morning. So when you see that, if there's any questions that you have about anything I talk about today, please just pop it in the Q&A section and I will make sure that I leave maybe 10 minutes at the end, hopefully, depending on how chatty I am, for me to answer any questions that you may have about this webinar or really anything to do with mental health. Because this is an area I'm very, very passionate about and knowledgeable about. So I think I can see the numbers have kind of slowed down. So just bear with me. Once I go into the talk, I can't see your questions coming in because I will be sharing my screen. So just bear with me until the end and I promise I will come back and I will answer those questions once we get to the end of the talk. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now. Oh, one last thing, housekeeping wise, we are recording this session. So if you join halfway through or if you need to leave a bit earlier, please don't worry, you will be given a link to this recording after today's talk. And I believe we also have a handout that will be shared with you, which has all the information from the presentation in there too. So there will be lots of information for you to come back to if you get pulled away or if there is anything that you miss and you want to come back to. So please just keep that in mind. Okay, so someone has asked, only texting is allowed, no talking from our side. Unfortunately, yes, in this style of webinar, I can't see you, unfortunately, but you can type in the Q&A, or I think there might be a chat box somewhere. So please feel free to add any questions in there. But yes, unfortunately, we don't have that back and forth talking option on this webinar style of Zoom. So apologies. I miss going into organizations and talking to you all and getting kind of the energy of the room. I really miss that. Hopefully one day I'll be back doing that and I can come and see you in one of your offices. All right, so I can see that person is laughing at me now. Okay, all right, I'm going to share my screen, so just bear with me while I do this. And let's start from the beginning. Okay, so we're going to be talking to you today, or I'm going to be talking to you today, about the secrets of a healthy mind. Now, everything that I'm going to share with you in this talk is based on the latest neuroscience evidence and research that we have in the field. So there are 7 healthy habits of a healthy mind that we're going to be talking through. And everything I share with you today is backed up by research and evidence. And it comes from the Institute of Neuroscience in the US, which is led by Professor Daniel Segal. And he is somebody I really look up to in the field of psychology. And he is somebody that has done an awful lot of work in this field to help us understand this more. So I'm just skipping through these little bits about us, but just so you know a little bit about the Lighthouse Arabia, for anyone who doesn't, we are a mental health and wellness centre based in central Dubai. We are an organisation of about 30 mental health professionals. most of which are clinical psychologists, but we also have psychiatrists, and we also have occupational therapy and speech and language therapy. So we offer a wide range of services, from anywhere from prenatal to children and adolescents to adults to couples, you name it, we try to offer it. So if you are needing or wanting to invest more in mental health, because it's not only when you have a mental health difficulty can you benefit from psychology, then we are a resource that you can access. And at the end of today's talk, I'll direct you to some of our Instagram accounts and our website where you can learn a little bit more about us. But I don't want to talk too much about us just today, because there is a lot to cover in today's talk. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about what we hope to learn through this webinar today. So we're going to start by talking a little bit about stress and how people tend to cope with stress. What are the signs of stress? Then we're going to talk about the healthy habits of the mind and the brain, and we're going to incorporate practical tips into your life that you can take these 7 healthy habits I'm going to talk about, and we're going to think about how we integrate them into your life. Now, a lot of the things that we're going to talk about, some may surprise you, but some you may already know. And I think the thing about this talk is that there are some things that you'll think, oh, yeah, I know that that helps my brain, and that I know that that's good for me. But in this era, this age of technology, of digital, of COVID, it's really hard for us to do the things that really help our brain and our minds. And we have been, there are so many distractions, there are so many things that get in the way of us doing the things that several centuries ago or 100 years ago were natural to us, that would have been a lot easier. There's lots of things that might be taking us away from doing these things. So for me, I'm coming from a place of realism where I know these 7 things. I do this talk many times, and often I fall off the wagon and I have to get myself back on to say, okay, you've missed this week, or you're not sleeping properly, or whatever it is. So there are things that I know I need to do. It's not about perfection. It's not about doing these things all of the time, but it's about noticing when you've lost something and how to get back on the wagon. So hopefully that's going to make sense as we go through the talk. So I'm going to start with this quote by David Rock that says, "We have entered an era of overwhelm, a time when too many people's mental well-being is being stretched through multitasking, fragmented attention, and information overload." And when we look at the statistics from the World Health Organization, at the beginning of the 21st century, they predicted that in 2020, depression would be the leading cause of ill health and disability. We reached that in 2015. So 5 years earlier than we predicted it would be. So depression is now the leading cause. When you look at any other health condition worldwide, depression is the leading cause. And now the World Health Organization are saying that depression will be the leading cause of global burden by 2030. So we really have to pay attention to our mental health. This is no longer something that we can put to one side, that we can ignore. There is no health without mental health. And I really, truly believe that. Okay. So let's think about the unhealthy signs of stress. So, we've got this person here sitting on the couch. They've got their popcorn in their hands. They've got their laptop in front of them. They've got burgers, I think, maybe some cans of beer, I'm not really sure. And sometimes this is how we deal with stress. And if it's sometimes, that's not awful. But if this is the only way that we manage stress and it's unhealthy, then we're going to see a problem. We're going to see that our vulnerability towards mental health conditions is going to be greater. So some of the most unhealthy ways of stress management are things like smoking, over or under eating. So often people who are very stressed, they're not sitting and they're not ordering proper meals, or they're just ordering takeout because they just need something quick and fast. They might be zoning out for hours in front of the TV or the computer. They might be withdrawing from friends and family. They may be using substances or other kind of forms of medication to relax. They may be sleeping too much or too little. They may be putting off things or procrastinating. They may be filling every minute of the day with activities. And this is a less well-known one, but actually avoidance of time by yourself or avoidance of facing problems is a huge thing that I see amongst some of the corporate people that I work with. Or taking your stress out on other people, so kind of getting quite irritable and angry or lashing out, or in rare cases perhaps even being physically violent. So something I hear a lot of is getting a lot of like really difficult road rage sometimes, or just feeling that, you know, I'm just lashing out very kind of unpredictably, and this isn't me, this isn't how I normally cope with stress. So all of these things are perhaps unhealthy ways of managing stress. As I said, I'm not asking for perfection. I appreciate that sometimes it is okay to put on Netflix, sit and relax and just give yourself that time to relax. And maybe it is okay to have, you know, that chocolate cake or whatever it is that kind of soothes you. But if these are the only ways in which you manage stress, you're likely to see some problems in the long term. Okay. So we are going to be talking about these 7 habits for the mind. And these 7 habits have been shown to be the most important habits that you can use to look after your brain. And we're talking very physically as well as kind of psychologically about your brain. So it is a vital organ. It is just like your heart, your lungs, etc. But it is also the place where we think and where we psychologically kind of process the things that are happening in our day. So we really want to look after that vital organ. We really want to do the things that keep it fit and healthy, like we exercise for our heart and we go to the GP for a checkup to check everything is okay. We need to apply that same principle to our minds and to our brain. So the 7 healthy habits that we're talking about are sleep. We're going to talk about physical time. We're going to talk about focus time. We're going to talk about time in. We're going to talk about downtime, playtime, and connecting time. And as I said, these are all the things that the Institute of Neurology has found to be the most effective things that keep our brains and our minds healthy and happy. And there is lots more information on their website. So the very first thing that we're going to talk about is sleep. And this is something that is a huge passion of mine and something which I've devoted more time personally prioritizing, but also professionally educating others on, and also just learning more about, because I've always known sleep was important, but really only now do we have more and more research that really helps back up what we knew about sleep in the first place. So it is the most effective thing that you can do for your mind and your body. Of any intervention, sleep is the simplest and the easiest, most effective thing that you can do. We need to refresh our mind, our brains, and our bodies, and we need to give the brain sleep in order to consolidate and process the events which we're dealing with during the day. And when we give our brain the rest it needs to consolidate learning, to recover from the stress of the day, then we're going to see huge, huge benefits to that. So we are now in, according again to the World Health Organization, we are in a catastrophic sleep loss epidemic. So if we think back to before we had, you know, everybody had a phone, before we had artificial lights, the sun would come down and that darkness would trigger melatonin in our bodies, which is a hormone. We call it the darkness hormone, that says, right, okay, let's start slowing down. Let's start getting ready for sleep. And we would just naturally slow down, sleep for at least 7 hours, and then we would wake when the sun rises again in the morning. Now, in this generation, in this era that we're in, we can stay up all night long if we want, and we have many, many distractions that can keep us awake. Many things that are happening in our day can keep us awake. Many things that we access at night can keep us awake. But there is lots and lots of research now that says that sleep deprivation, and sleep deprivation is less than 7 hours, can be more lethal than food deprivation. okay, more lethal, can have more more physical health complications on us than anything related to food deprivation. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. But the best sleep happens between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. So I know, particularly in this region, I see lots of people going to bed a lot later. And I think naturally there are people who are morning larks, we call them, or night owls. So naturally there are two different types of people, and we have different natural rhythms in terms of when we sleep. But we know that the best sleep happens, that slow wave sleep happens between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. So just be mindful of your sleep and think about, are you prioritizing it? How much sleep did you get last night? So the effect of a lack of sleep on the mind and body is now just much, much better understood. So it is critical for restoring our homeostatic state. So the regulation of our hormones, and that can have an impact on how we eat, the food choices that we make, how we feel, our mood. Is critical to repair muscles and tissues. It's absolutely critical for our immunity. There is lots of research that says those who consistently have a lack of sleep or who have disrupted sleep, such as shift workers or airline pilots, for example, they are much more likely to experience physical health difficulties like the ones that you see on the right here. But it's critical for our glymphatic system. This is the system that is only accessed when we sleep. And this is where the brain is given the opportunity to flush out bad toxins. So this only happens during deep sleep. So if you're not getting the required deep sleep, your brain is literally walking around with all of those toxins inside of it. So whereas our slow wave sleep, the other parts of sleep can flush out toxins in our body, in our brain, we need that deep sleep that only occurs after a certain amount of time in bed. So it's absolutely essential for our memory processing and our emotion regulation, for our learning, for consolidating memories and creativity. And we know that a lack of sleep is linked to lots of different health conditions, in particular Alzheimer's, having a high blood pressure, cancer, stroke, hypoglycemia, and other aspects of poor mental health. I think it's rare that I see someone who has a mental health difficulty who doesn't have some sort of disruption to their sleep. Either they feel like they want to sleep for long periods of time, or they're not sleeping at all. And actually, what we've also found in the recent evidence is that sometimes an intervention around sleep can reduce symptoms of depression. So in this study in 2011, at the bottom here, it says that depression that is associated with long work hours was primarily the result of sleep deprivation. So when you give them the treatment around insomnia, what you see is that depression gets much, much better. So the very first thing I do with anyone who comes to see me is check their sleep and to make that a priority. Okay. And we're going to talk at the end a little bit about what you can do to make sure that sleep is a priority. But really, it's about having a rock solid sleep hygiene. And I used to talk about this a lot with clients, but I didn't really take my own advice because I didn't think I could sleep very well. But I am now very, very good with my sleep hygiene. Not every time, but I try to be, and I know it works. So I can share my top tips with you at the end. So the second healthy habit that we're going to discuss is playtime. And this is something that I think as adults, we always forget to prioritize. We think of play as something that's associated with children and childhood. We don't necessarily feel that we need play to help us in any way. And we definitely don't prioritize it, or at least the majority of people I work with certainly don't prioritize it. But play is really spontaneity. It's the joy of experimenting with life. It's creativity. It's being silly. It's allowing ourselves to be playful and enjoying new experiences and trying out new things and putting ourselves in new and interesting situations and kind of getting down onto the level of a child and just bringing in that playfulness that we sometimes reserve for children. And what we know about play is that it's equally important to other basic drivers of sleep, rest, and food. So think about it. When was the last time you felt playful? When was the last time you were able to be playful or try something brand new or do something that was a little bit out of your comfort zone, that was fun, maybe a little bit scary too, but was mostly fun? I think for anyone who has children or has access to children, they naturally bring out some of our playfulness. So this is one of the easiest ways to be playful. I'm lucky I have opportunities to do that in my work sometimes, but there are other ways to also be playful, like trying something new for the first time, investing in time with people who are engaging in playful new activities. So what this playfulness does is it allows us to be flexible and to really build that flexibility muscle. And when we're not playful, when we're not spontaneous, when we're not kind of dropping things and trying something completely new, we become quite rigid and quite stuck in our ways. And actually that is not useful for us in terms of our mental health and our well-being. We need to be flexible most of the time. We need to keep agile and we need to be resilient to what's coming our way. So for example, the fact that I'm doing this webinar with you today was not something I'd planned today. It was something that actually I had to be quite flexible about because there was an emergency that Dr. Daniela had to attend. So just being able to be flexible and managing that flexibility is really, really important, and extending life beyond what is familiar, because we have this wonderful brain that is plastic. And what we mean by that is it can build new connections all the time. So at any point in your life, even in your 90s, you can learn new things and build new neural connections in your brain. So think about playfulness. Think about, when was the last time I felt playful? And are there ways in which I can integrate this? So something one of my clients recently did was, we talked about this and we also were thinking a little bit about anxiety. And so what they decided to do was to sign up for a comedy workshop. So learning how to deliver comedy, which I just thought was incredibly brave, but a really, really lovely way to be a bit playful and try something completely out of their comfort zone. So that's just, you don't all have to do this, but just one example of how people may find ways to integrate some playfulness in their life. Okay, so the third aspect of a healthy mind that we're going to talk about is downtime. Now, this is the one that I struggle with the most, but the one that I find most beneficial. And I'm going to hopefully present to you what we really mean by downtime. So often when we talk about downtime in society, we're thinking probably about relaxing on the sofa, watching a bit of Netflix, just sitting and engaging in some sort of relaxing activity. But actually, in this case, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about disconnecting completely for the sake of integration and insight. So it's really giving your brain the opportunity to completely switch off and rest and just let it go where it needs to go, let it wander. So it's not about doing mindfulness. We have no intention. It's kind of intentionally having no intention. It's when we're non-focused, there's no specific goal, we're just simply letting our mind wander and relax. And the best place I do this is on the beach, just sitting and just looking out and just letting my brain go wherever it needs to go. But there are lots of different ways in which we can do this. But actually, it can be something that we really, really struggle with in this society where we're often busy doing things. We don't often give our minds opportunity to rest. So often I find myself, if I'm sat on the sofa having a moment to myself, I'll often have this urge to pick up my phone, to just check my emails, even if there is no new emails, which is rare. But if there isn't, if I've just done them, I have this urge to kind of look at my phone, and I don't often just let myself sit and just let my mind go wherever it wants to go. So it's a difficult one. And if you feel that this is something you might struggle with, and a lot of my clients struggle with this, then start with just 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes every day. Find a place where you can sit and just let your mind go wherever it needs to go. So it could be in the car before you walk into your house. It could be in the morning when you're drinking your morning coffee. It could be spending some time at the weekend going to the beach, whatever works for you, but just giving your brain a place where it can it's not processing information coming in from a phone, a person, the environment that it's in. It's just letting it rest. So if you're able to do this, it feels like anti-productive. Often people say, I have this desire to be productive all the time, but it feels like it's not productive, but it actually is, okay? It really is. It's helping your brain to rest. So if you think about it, often when you have those aha moments, or when you're kind of, if you're struggling with a problem for a while, certainly for me, there are many moments where I've had an idea really just out of the blue. I haven't been doing any kind of work on that particular thing, but I will have just been daydreaming about something, and then like something comes into my head and I'm like, oh, that's an idea for something related to work or for something else. So giving our brain time to rest helps your brain to make those connections. It helps it to problem solve, to be creative, to have better insight and better decision making. So if you are trying to solve a problem, it's really great to give yourself a bit of downtime and come back to the problem. So you can start by, struggling with it, gathering all your facts, then spend time away from the problem, stop, surrender control, go and kind of give yourself some rest. We call this the incubation time. And then what you will find is there's this breakout, this sudden insight or new perspective that emerges at some point along the way. So it really helps to build insight, and it really helps us to give our brain the opportunity to put all the pieces of the puzzle together to help us with complex problem solving. Okay. So the next one we have is time in. So this is more of our mindfulness, our reflection, our attunement with ourselves. So really this is about having that internal conversation with ourselves to just really reflect on, how am I? To have that check-in, to reflect on what's been going on in the day, to focus on any thoughts, feelings, sensations, anything that might be happening for you, and giving yourself an opportunity to really just spend a bit of time checking in with yourself and having that attunement to see, what is it that I need today or this week or this month to look after myself. So this can be achieved in many different ways. It could be through mindfulness, it could be through journaling, it could be through having therapy even. There could be lots of different ways in which you check in with yourself and you make that priority. So when you do this, it's a very specific type of conscious, focused attention on the inner life of the self in the here and now. So sometimes this is quite alien to people. People really struggle to reflect, to give themselves time in. Often people are quite scared, what's going to come up if I suddenly start looking into my brain and noticing what's happening? Am I going to be overwhelmed by some of these things that come up in my mind? But actually, in actual fact, that's not the case. What happens is, the better we are at identifying how we're feeling and the thought processes we're having, the better able we are to cope with stress, and the better able we are to cope with those emotions. The problems tend to be when we push these feelings down and we ignore them, or we leave them, or we kind of carry on with life without paying attention to what is going on in our mind. So it's focusing on the interior world. It's growing those integrative fibers of the brain. The better we understand ourselves, the better we are able to cope. It refers to more than just relaxation. It's really just connecting to yourself, connecting to your values, and really reflecting on situations that are happening in your life, reflecting on yourself, and being kind of aware of those things and looking after those things. So we sometimes talk about the wheel of awareness. So you can find this, my favorite, Dr. Dan Siegel, or he's actually a professor. He gives a very wonderful 25-minute guided meditation. You can just Google on YouTube, Wheel of Awareness, Dan Segal, and you will find a really lovely guided meditation that helps you to go from kind of the inside and then outside. So we talk about this sixth sense. So he goes around these different areas of yourself and really helps you to focus on the different parts of your reflection. So, you know, it's those five senses that we think about. So the touch, taste, smell, sight, hearing, and then it's kind of that heightened sense of interconnectedness with people. Then it's kind of mental activities, and then it's the interior of the body. So it's looking inwards, you know, what is going on inside of my body? How am I feeling? And when we're able to do that, we're really, you know, able to feel calmer and to understand ourselves. So again, Jon Kabat-Zinn is also a really, really wonderful person. You can just Google, there's loads and loads of lovely free meditations that you can access. Or one of the most simplest mindfulness exercises you can do is, and you can find it online, you can just ring the bell. There's a mindfulness bell that you tap and you can get the sound of it, and you just want to let that ring and just pay attention to that for those 5 minutes that bell rings, and then it will ring again to signal the end. So really just practicing. Again, when it comes to mindfulness, I was one of those people that really, really struggled with mindfulness. It took me a long, long time. I used to run mindfulness groups. This was a very, very long time ago. And I really struggled with my own mindfulness practice. But over time, you know, I started with very small sections of mindfulness, and then I built it up and I built it up. And now it's something that I really just do intuitively and naturally. And it's really something that is very beneficial to help me in my reflection and looking after myself. Okay, so I've lost track of how many. I think this might be 4 or 5. So we have connecting time. So the healing power of relationships. And we know whenever anyone is going through a difficult time, or just in life in general, when we're connected to other people, it really, really helps us to cope with all kinds of different difficult situations. And just life is just much more enjoyable when we connect with other people. Ideally, this is in person. And I know that during COVID-19, this is particularly difficult because we're having to have a lot of our connecting time online through Zoom. Unfortunately, I'm not with you in your office today as I would normally have been, but I'm here on Zoom. So I'm not able to have that same connection with you as I would have done in the past. And similarly, when it comes to our friends and our family members, we're not able to connect in the same way as a result of COVID-19. And that is definitely having an impact on a lot of us at the moment. But what this does is it really activates the brain's social part of the brain. And this is incredibly beneficial and protective for the brain. So we know that social support has a threefold impact on work, stressor strain relations. So first of all, it reduces the strain that you experience. Secondly, it mitigates perceived stressors by talking it through with someone, and it moderates the stressor strain relationship. Okay, so all of these three things together help to reduce the stress involved in workplace scenarios. But this really, when we're talking about stress, it's not just stress at work that we're talking about, it's any stress in your environment. And we know that isolation can have a physical and psychological impact on us, and loneliness really does kill. And there is lots and lots of research to back this up. My favorite one being the Harvard Grant study, which is discussed here. So what this was, it's a beautiful study that was done. It started in the 70s, I believe, and it's been going for a very long time now. And they looked at, it was actually only done with men, but you know, we're taking this and thinking about women as well. But it looked at 2 different groups of men who were living in different parts of America, in New York, and looking at those from a low socioeconomic status and those from a higher economic status. And their question was, what does happiness, what leads to happiness? What keeps people resilient and happy in their life? And they looked at many, many different areas. So they looked at money, they looked at success, they looked at family, whether having children, whether being in a relationship, whether having friends, health outcomes. They really tried to be as encompassing of all these different things that we think keep us happy, to really determine what kept those, what was the determinant of happiness. And what they found was the best predictor of happiness, of good mental health and physical health outcomes was having good, meaningful connections in your life. So it wasn't about the number of connections, it was about having good quality connections where it felt meaningful, it felt very connected, and they were secure attachments. And what they found was those people were much more likely to have a positive outlook on life. They were much more likely to be in better mental and physical health, and they were much less likely to die earlier, which is absolutely I love that study. I think it's so interesting. And feeling isolated, we know, can raise blood pressure, it can weaken the immunity, it can increase depression and lower our kind of subjective well-being. So spend time with the people that you love. Make sure you make time for connection. And I think, again, in COVID, this is a little bit tricky, but also when we're so distracted by lots of different work-related stressors, this can be really, really hard for us to prioritize. But it really is something that's important for your mental well-being. So physical time is I think we're at number 5 or 6, is our 6th skill that we want to be making sure we prioritize. Again, I know for me, when I'm stressed, the first thing that goes is my exercise, because I think I have no time whatsoever to do my exercise. I need to cancel that gym session and I need to sit in front of my laptop and do whatever it is that I need to do. And yet, what we know is that actually when you feel that way, that is the time when you need exercise more than ever, because moving our bodies will strengthen the brain in many, many ways. It increases the blood flow, it increases our oxygen, it helps to physically nurture the brain, as well as reducing stress and moving adrenaline out of our body. So I really try hard to not let that feeling of stress stop me from doing the exercise that I do, because I know it's going to really help me in the long term, even though, I can't do that hour of work that I feel in that moment I need to do. So we know that physical time improves our memory, improves our ability to learn. It improves our cognitive functions, our executive functionings, which is our ability to plan, to reason, to make good long-term decisions. Overall, it improves all of our cognitive functioning, it enhances our mood, gives us more energy, and it maintains that flexibility and that plasticity that we spoke about. We know that those people who exercise regularly, their brain is also getting more of that blood flow, more of that oxygen that helps it to optimally perform. And it protects the brain from damage. So there's even research and evidence to say that within therapy, people should be incorporating more movement. So we should be walking and talking more, because that walking and talking is getting the brain and the blood flow to the brain, and that can help that person make better connections within therapy, which again is something I find particularly interesting. Okay, so we also know that right now sitting is, again, it's been talked about as being the most underrated threat of our time, because we sit for so much of our time, depending on what job you do, but most of us working in office-based environments spend a lot of time sitting, and they talk about it as the new smoking. So for every 2 hours spent sitting in front of the computer or the television, the average person raises their risk of colon cancer by 8%, and endometrial cancer by 10%, and lung cancer by 6%. So the National Cancer Institute released a study stating that people who sit more throughout the day run a 66% higher chance of some types of cancer than more active people. So we really, really want to make sure that we're moving our bodies, that we're giving our brain and our bodies that opportunity to move, to help us cope with stress, but just keep ourselves in good physical condition. So it doesn't have to be, I know it's sometimes unrealistic to block out, an hour at the gym every day, but move in other ways. So find ways to walk to places, take the stairs instead of the lift. These little ways in which we can increase our movement can have a big, big impact on our well-being. Okay. And I think this might be the last one, which is focus time. So this is managing your attention management and performance. So when we're able to focus, stay focused, and then refocus efficiently and effectively, this is very, very beneficial for our brain. And it also is a huge way to manage our stress. So we often believe that we are all good multitaskers. And actually, I'm going to say that there is absolutely no such thing as a good multitasker. Our brain is simply not designed in that way. It's not designed to focus on multiple things coming in at once. Actually, what works best for us as a human being is to break our focus into chunks and block time to focus on one thing at a time. And again, this is something I struggle with when I have lots of different tasks that I want to do, and emails coming in and WhatsApps coming in. There's lots of ways in which I can be distracted, but what works best for me is time blocking. So if I have a task that's going to take me an hour, giving myself that hour, put the emails and the WhatsApps away so that I can really just focus on that task and then come back to my phone. And again, I know in the way that we work at the moment, often we are expected to respond to people. We're expected to kind of be on our phones a lot. But actually, this is really important to help us not to feel overwhelmed and to give us opportunities to complete the work that we need to do. So multitasking actually impairs our performance in the long term. It's definitely better for us to sustain and focus on one thing at a time. So again, I would encourage you to think about the ways in which you work, think about how you prioritize tasks, how you focus, what distractions you have around you, and is there a way to block time where those distractions are kind of put to one side to really give you that opportunity to focus and stay focused on a task. And actually, overall, you'll be a lot more efficient and you'll feel much better for it as well. I lied, there's one more. Well, investing time is putting them all together, and we kind of talk about this as a mental health toolbox. So thinking about how do I take all of this knowledge that I've gained from Dr. Catherine today, and how do I actually prioritize and put these things into practice? So here are some things that you can do. So in terms of sleep, as I mentioned, it's about having a rock solid sleep hygiene schedule. So really this works. And I know a lot of people that come to me and say, I've tried, it doesn't work. But really ask yourself the question, have you really tried? Have you really put your phone away 2 hours before you go to bed? Because that's a really hard one. Have you really, cooled the room before you go in there? Have you taken a nice hot shower and then come into that air-conditioned room to trigger the body to let heat go out of the body, because that's what triggers the body into sleep. Thinking about putting blue light blocking glasses if you are someone who looks at screens late at night, setting a room temperature low, putting your phone out of reach, bringing back an old-fashioned alarm clock if you need to, aromatherapy oils, lavender on the bed sheets. These kinds of things are really, really crucial. And one thing that's not written here but is absolutely essential is setting a regular sleep-wake cycle. So I know for me that my body, it needs to be in a routine, and we all need to be in a routine actually to be able to know when it needs to start getting ready to sleep. I also cannot expect my mind to slow down within half an hour. I need to give myself a good couple of hours to shut work off and start to slow down. We can't just expect our brain to be processing and then sleep. We actually need to give it time to slow down, wind down, and get ready for sleep. So those are some of the things that you can do. In terms of play, as I said, having time with children is a really easy way to just naturally be quite playful. But there are other things you can do. So really engaging in any kind of unstructured activity, choosing kind of new activities you've never been to. We've got Bounce on there as an example, which is a trampoline park. But really anything that is just simply fun and silly and playful, that is what you want to think about. Do I have anything like that in my life at the moment? If not, what would I be willing to try? Downtime is my favorite one. It's one that I struggle with, but I actually think is really beneficial. So I talked a little bit about this. Really, you want to put your phone away. You just want to give yourself maybe 5 minutes in the beginning to do nothing, sitting on a beach, watching a flame or a bonfire. Or if you're not the camping type, you might want to just have a candle and just really watch that flame, or just sit in the garden before it gets too hot and just really just let your mind wander. It's just giving yourself time to do nothing, really, really do nothing. Time in would be things like journaling, mindfulness, meditation, therapy, spending time in nature, just even having a morning check-in where you say, how am I doing today? What is the emotions that I'm feeling? Is there anything I could give myself that would make me feel even just 1% better right now? Connecting time would be kind of thinking a little bit about your friends, your family. When do I see them? What do I do with them? Do I have things planned? How can I make sure that I prioritize this in my life right now? Then we have physical time. So ideally you want to be doing something 3 times a week that's about 30 minutes is ideal. This is what is set by the World Health Organization. But it could be yoga, it could be walking in between appointments, it could be taking the stairs. We at the Lighthouse have a Fitbit challenge going, so we're always being quite competitive with our steps. You might be able to do something like that in the organization. Just anything that gets you connecting to your body and moving your body in whatever way suits you is really important. In terms of focus time, it would be putting distractions away, turning off notifications, eliminating interruptions, having a rigid schedule, trying to limit access to people or things that are going to take you away from that unless it's absolutely necessary. And lastly, investing in looking after your mental health would be coming to webinars like this. It would be learning new anxiety management skills, stress management skills, emotional well-being checks, developing parenting skills if you're a parent, or time management skills. I think there's lots of lovely things available on the masterclass series, which I'm hearing about, which just give you a bit more information about mental health and aspects of mental health and well-being. Again, our mental health is not just for people who struggle or who have a mental health disorder. Taking care of our mental health, we should all be doing. We all have mental health. So just looking after that and taking time for ourselves is absolutely essential. Just like we go to the GP to have a physical checkup, we also want to do that with our mental health as well. So we do something similar called an emotional well-being check, which is half an hour. You can come in, meet with a psychologist, and we just talk about, different aspects of mental health and helping identify things that you can improve on and directing you to resources that might be able to support you with that as well, if you were interested. But there's lots of other ways you can do that. Okay, so this is just an example of how you might want to schedule your diary to include all of these things. So we've got kind of 3 mornings where you go to the gym, you've got this work kind of Sunday to Thursday, and there's a 45 minutes on with a 10-minute checking of phones, and that's happening throughout the day. There's a bit of space at the end of the day for downtime or therapy. There's social time on Mondays and Wednesdays. And then there's Friday, which is, going to the beach with the kids or doing nothing. There's meditation, there's connecting with mum. There's different ways in which these things are blocked into the schedule to really help you to really make time for all of these 7 things that we've talked about today. Okay, I think, yes, I'm at the 10-minute mark, so I'm going to stop talking for a moment and just come back to you. There was one thing I just want to finish on this last thing actually. So there's a lovely quote here that when health is absent, wisdom cannot reveal itself, art cannot manifest, strength cannot fight, wealth becomes useless, and intelligence cannot be applied. So I just thought I'd leave on that mark, and we'll come to your questions and just see what you've got for me. Oh, now my laptop's decided it doesn't want to work. Typical. Okay, bear with me a second. I'm sure it's going to come back. There we go. So there's a little homework task at the end that we ask people to just think about this next week and assess where you stand on the different dimensions. So look at these, the different 7 areas that we talked about, and make small changes and set small goals and put it into a time slot like you've seen in that schedule that I talked about. Just giving yourself an opportunity to look at where am I right now and which ones do I need to prioritize, which ones do I need to give a bit more time to, and then kind of planning that into your day. So as I said, it's not easy to do all of these things, even though some of them sound simple. Believe me, they are not, but if you can do them and if you can prioritize them, you're going to make yourself a lot more resilient and keep your mind healthy and happy. So let me see what questions I've got. So someone has asked, what if the average sleeping time is 12 hours per day? Which is a very interesting question. And actually the research says that sleeping too much is also detrimental to our mental health and well-being. So most of us are in a state of sleep deprivation where we're sleeping less than 7 hours. But there is also dangers with sleeping too much. So the first thing I would recommend is if you really are sleeping 12 hours a day, and that's, that's uninterrupted 12 hours a day, and it's it's consistently, it's not just a one-off where you just needed to catch up on sleep, I would just check that out with your GP and just see if there's a physical reason why your body is requiring that you need to sleep for that length of time. But actually, we shouldn't be needing to sleep for 12 hours a day. Really, we want to be aiming somewhere between 7 and 8 hours is the optimal level of sleep. So that would be my answer to that one. So someone has asked, a great question, is it enough to relax and disconnect by sleeping, or we need to be awake for that? And actually, that's a great question. And we actually want to have times both awake and asleep where we disconnect. Okay, so there are different processes happening when we sleep. Our brain is actually still very active when we're sleeping, even though it feels like it's resting. But there are different things happening in the brain when we're sleeping. And if we can give ourselves that disconnection during the day too, we call this sometimes daily recovery. And actually we need that to be happening when we're awake and active as well as when we're sleeping. So yes, or actually no, we don't just relax and disconnect by sleeping. We also need to give ourselves pockets in the day where we're giving our brain a break from processing information. Again, it's just not designed to be constantly processing information. And as that very first slide says, we're in an era of overwhelm, where we are constantly bombarded with information from screens, from people, from, different things happening in our life. So yes, you want both. Someone else has asked, during downtime, usually all negative thoughts come to my mind, which makes me very unpleasant. So how to tackle that and make it more positive, healthy, beneficial to mind's health? So that's a really great question, and people often worry about that actually. And that's why people avoid thinking about themselves, because they don't want to think about negative things, or they don't want to think about difficult memories that maybe they're just filling their time blocking. Now, you can continue in that way, and maybe in the short term, you'll have relief because you won't be thinking about these unpleasant things. But in the long term, what happens is all of these things remain stuck in our physical body and in our minds. So actually, if you're finding that there are lots of negative thoughts when I have this downtime, try and write them down, keep a journal, keep a log, and look for patterns. Look at what are these negative thoughts trying to communicate with me? Why am I feeling this way? Because these things don't come for no reason. There will be some connection, something that has to be processed or discussed to help you to move forward from those negative thoughts. And of course, a therapist could help you do that, but you may be able to do a lot of that on your own through journaling, through looking at patterns, and then shifting. So if you're having a negative thought such as, I'm really no good at my job, for example, then being aware of, that's how I'm thinking at the moment. It's no wonder that I'm feeling quite disconnected from work or unhappy with work. So maybe I want to shift that, maybe that thought, is it really true how I'm thinking about this at the moment? Is there an alternative way to think about this that might be more healthy and helpful? And then start to kind of integrate that into your thinking. So when it's there, you can say, wow, okay, this is my thought process. Let me try a different way of thinking about this and see how that shifts your feeling. You might also want to invest in thinking a little bit more about self-compassion as well, because when we're experiencing negative thoughts, then we might want to bring on board almost like an internal friend that talks to us, that says, wow, you're really being hard on yourself right now. And again, is there an alternative way we can look at this? Does it have to be the way that we're thinking about it at the moment? So there's lots more I could say about that. It's difficult to do that here, but I hope that gives you a little bit of an indication. I know it's really scary to sit with these thoughts and feelings, but it really is the best way to develop that emotional intelligence and help you. So someone has asked, how do you decide how much of each habit you need? I.e., how do I divide my time between time in, downtime, playtime, etc.? Is it as simple as making sure I have a little of each day? Yeah, I think you've answered your own question there. I think and maybe you can't get everything in one day, because I certainly know, I can't exercise and be playful and meditate and focus on one thing at a time. So, don't be too hard on yourself, but look at your week and try and kind of identify, when can I make sure that I've moved my body? When can I make sure that I have a check-in with myself? When can I engage in some playfulness? Maybe I could do that at the weekend. So it's thinking more broadly in the week. And it's just also identifying when perhaps you haven't had something like that in your life for a while. So downtime for me was one of those things that was a bit of an aha moment, where I was like, I don't give myself downtime. The first time Dr. Salaher, our managing director, gave this talk, I was blown away, because I thought, I never give myself downtime, never. And therefore now I really notice when I'm doing it, and I notice the benefits of it as well. So yeah, I would look at it over a week. I wouldn't be too hard on yourself if you're not doing something. So it's just about picking yourself back into, okay, I've noticed I'm not doing my downtime. How do I get it back? And when can I schedule that? And how do I prioritize it? Okay, so the YouTube meditation I mentioned was, where can I write it? I'm going to type it for this person here, but it's, if you just type in Dan Siegel, Wheel of Awareness. And that should be in the handout that you'll get as well. So he has a really lovely mindfulness meditation. It's 25 minutes long on YouTube. So someone has asked, this is an interesting question about naps, and does it actually help our mental health? So naps can be really good for us. Again, if you go back to when we were first humans on this planet, we would have had more naps and less solid sleep naturally. That's what we would have done. But because of the way that we work, we don't really give ourselves time to nap anymore. So I think you can do that. I would just be careful with naps that you're not disrupting your sleep. So sometimes what I find is people nap in the afternoon and then they can't go to sleep, and it disrupts their sleep schedule in the evening. So I would just look at your kind of overall day. I think naps are best if they're about 20 minutes long. So it's really just a quick burst of energy, a quick refresh. It's not meant to be something that's very, very long, like several hours. But if you're not getting enough sleep, you're much more likely to nap. So really you want to try and get a good kind of solid block of 7 hours, maybe with a short nap. But if that nap is disrupting you getting your 7 hours, I would cut the nap out and go straight for that kind of whatever time you go to sleep until the morning. Okay. I can still see I've got lots of questions, but unfortunately I have a client at this time, so I'm not going to be able to get to all of them. I'm very sorry. I would love to talk more about this. I feel like there's lots more I can say, but please, if there's any question that you really would like us to answer, you can ask us, you can send us a DM on one of our Instagram accounts. So we have Lighthouse Arabia or Dr. Salaha Afridi, who is our managing director. And they will answer your questions. It may take a little bit of time to get to them, but we always try and answer lots of questions. So I will stop there for today. Thank you so much. I can see there's lots of you still here, so you listened for the whole talk. So thank you very much for joining me today. It was lovely to be here. And good luck with trying to integrate some of these things into your day. All right, have a lovely day, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.